Today on Off the Clock, we're going to start our first of a two-part series on age in the workplace. We're going to talk about employees at both ends of the spectrum, younger employees and older employees. We're going to start with younger employees today.
Welcome to Off the Clock, the webcast of employment attorneys at Miller Johnson, where we discuss what is happening in the HR world and provide practical insight and advice.
What category would you put yourself in, Sarah?
I like to think I'm middle of the spectrum, but I'm not sure everyone agrees with that anymore.
And we're not talking about, we should do a third episode on the middle of the spectrum.
Yes. Yeah,
one concept comes to mind, but we'll decide later if we're do that. We'll leave that for a surprise. But.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. I've been thinking, quite frankly, a lot about both employees on the, can we say younger end of the spectrum? What sort of words are okay? And employees and more experienced.
We'll let the network executives determine whether they need to bleep it out.
Okay, got it.
By that I mean
and those closer to on the other end of the spectrum, closer perhaps to my age.
We're not going to discuss our ages, right?
Oh, we can.
But
the audience should know that I'm a year older than you, right? But you've repeatedly made clear that you think you're on an entirely different age bracket than I am. But that's okay.
That's okay. I always like being younger than the people I'm with because it makes me feel young.
Well, yeah.
So that is my strategy. That is my mental well-being strategy.
You are younger.
To hang out with people who are older than me.
Exactly.
So we always talk about themes, right? Yes. How do we come up with these topics in the first place? Themes. And I have noticed over the past year or so, topics come up with clients that deal both with just issues that come up with younger employees, or we could say individuals newer in their careers, newer in the workforce, and their interactions with folks who have been in the workforce for a much longer period of time.
Right.
And we'll talk about that, but there's also experiences that are unique, right, to folks who are newer in their careers that keep popping up over and over.
Yes.
So we've got a few categories of those. We can just toss them back and forth if you'd like. The first one that grabbed my attention, and this has been, I will admit, a few years now. Mm-hmm. Took me a little while to get my head around it so everyone can benefit from my experience here, is the concept of a safe space.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Okay.
The first time I heard this, I became very alarmed.
Me too.
When an employee told their employer they needed a safe space, or their supervisor's office was not a safe space, I took that very literally and was very concerned about what was happening in the office that jeopardized their safety.
My brain went to sexual assault.
Yes.
Or OSHA.
Safety first.
I don't feel safe here.
Right.
And you think, my God, what is it? Is it the decibel level? Is it the air quality? And it turns out that folks, let's just say younger than us, and particularly those newest in the workforce, to be clear, have used this phrase and just grown up in a different environment where this phrase was used to describe psychological safety or emotional safety.
Yes.
Right? Started a lot in higher education, but now folks are graduating, right? And they're working for us.
Yes. Right.
And they continue to expect, and by the way, I'm not saying this expectation is unreasonable, so I'm not making fun of that, but they continue to expect to be in a place that is emotionally and psychologically, well, at least not unsafe, right? Harmful. That's not harmful to them. This combines a lot with a lot of focus recently on mental health, et cetera, which they have also been the recipients of, that you and I weren't coming up, right, in higher ed or in employment. But it's the phraseology that can sometimes be unduly alarming to folks like us. So the first step is, if you haven't heard that phrase in your workplace yet, great. It probably means people feel pretty good. If someone does come to you with a phrase like that, take a deep breath. Don't do what I did. And think, my God, let's call 911. Right? Why are you here in my office? Right. And by the way, it's similar to other words that have been
I was
used.
just going to say, there's been an evolution, right?
There has been. So before safe space, I mean, bullying was a hot word. Right? I feel
Harassment.
bullied, harassed continually, but even longer than that, I feel harassed. Whenever any of these, what potentially alarming words are used, the most important thing to do first is to take a deep breath, do not panic, and drill down with the person that came to you what they mean by that. It might not be what you think they mean
Correct.
at all. It might be, but it might not be.
Most likely not. And by drilling down, I think it's helpful to understand, number one, what the conduct or behavior was that made them feel that way.
Exactly.
And then understand what those feelings are, right? So there's somebody did something. What is it that was done?
Yes.
Okay.
Why do you feel that way?
And then why do you feel
just-
that way, right?
That's how I would always, I'm sorry to hear that. Why do you tell me what happened and why
Yeah.
you feel
Okay.
that way? Right?
Yes, exactly.
A lot of times I get calls when the word harassment is used.
Right.
Because
It's like
people
call the
'cause-
lawyer, right?
Right, because it's a legally significant
Yes.
word.
Right.
So that is overused for non-legally significant issues. But on the flip side, when people talk about safe spaces and bullying, that can be unlawful harassment, right? So we don't get the call then because the H word was not used.
Right. That's
so
a good point.
I think of them all almost as interchangeable.
Okay. And from my experience, where I've seen this come up, it's often in the context of an individual who has some sort of authority over that employee, trying to talk to them about maybe job performance concerns, trying to coach them, etc.
Right.
Do you agree?
I agree. That's when we hear about it.
Yes. Okay.
Because part of having a safe space, being in a psychologically and emotionally safe space, is not feeling bad, right? This is what some people believe. And again, there's no judgment here. This is what it is, right? Is not the avoidance of bad feelings. And when your supervisor is not thrilled with something,
Right.
it feels bad,
It does.
even if it's legitimate.
Right.
It's not, we've all been there, let's face it, right? It doesn't feel good.
No, we want to do things right. We want
Right.
to do things well. And so to hear the news that that's not the case can be difficult to hear.
It is. It's in the good feeling, bad feeling bucket, right? It's usually for most people, right? Except for only the best, most evolved, it falls into the bad feeling bucket. And then if you compound that with a communication style
Right.
of a supervisor, it can become alarming to
Right.
the employee.
So here's how I've seen it play out, just generally speaking, right? Supervisor has meeting with employee doesn't respond well to the feedback from the supervisor, sends an email. It's usually an email to the HR representative, often very long, uses lots of words like safe space, maybe all of the words, safe space, harassment, bullying,
All the things.
etc., right?
All the things.
Assume the HR person sorts out and understands that there's no unlawful conduct, there's no physical harm, there's nothing like that. It really just is this employee feeling bad about the information that the supervisor is trying to provide for them.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to our HR folks who are listening?
First of all, I think that takes a minute. We're not going to go through it all today.
Right.
I'm not sure if investigation might be an overblown term to use, but it does take a few to figure out
Yeah, sure.
what we're talking
Right.
about here, right? It's not obvious just based on one
Right.
conversation. You might have to ask other colleagues, et cetera,
Right.
et cetera. But right, so we eventually get to the point where the person who reported feeling unsafe does have performance issues or attendance
Right.
issues that do need to be addressed for this person to be successful in the organization. And for that to happen, someone needs to tell them. It's not fair for people to expect our people to be telepathic, right? No one tells you, you will never know. So then the options are to work with the supervisor, maybe some coaching if you found that maybe a different communication style might be more effective, right? Because as soon as people feel they have that bad feeling, they get defensive and shut down a little bit. And we can say, toughen up, don't be a snowflake. But the reality is it's not effective. It's not effective, right, to bully or badger or demean, right, when giving critical feedback. The person will not improve based on that. So some improvement, coaching, mentoring of the supervisor might be helpful, right? But if we find that actually that person's doing everything, best practice,
Right.
right? But at the end of the day, I feel bad, and it makes me feel bad and uncomfortable whenever my boss tells me I made a mistake, and that really is the issue. Then there can be coaching for me, whether it's an outside coach or HR counseling or whatever, because receiving
I was going to say
feedback
receiving
is a skill.
It absolutely is a skill.
It can be learned.
Right.
And just because folks don't have it walking into the workplace, because there is no college class on that. There is no high school class on that. Mm-hmm. And some people, now it's the stereotype time, which you should not do in your workplaces, but everyone got a trophy for everything.
Right.
Right? Even the people that came in last place have not learned how to work through feeling bad, and that it's not the end of the world. And what is the intention with what your supervisor had, right, when giving you that feedback? And assuming positive intent, right? And using it to move forward and improve.
I really like that, and I like the concept of that two-way street, right? Because again, if we can sort through and realize that this is really I shouldn't say just, but this is an issue with a supervisor providing feedback and the employee receiving it, you can communicate to the employee that it is a two-way street, and we'd be happy to work with the supervisor with regard to how they're providing the feedback, but also we need to have a conversation with them about how they're receiving the feedback. And part of being an employee and being successful in any job is the ability to receive feedback, right?
For sure.
Feedback is the biggest gift you can give someone on a path of success, right?
I
You
see.
and I both would say the reason that we've become the attorneys we've become is because people were willing to give us feedback,
Right.
some of which was delivered in various ways, but that's okay, right? But the point is that it
But
does,
it did help, even the ones that was
helps.
given back in a more, in a harsher way, still.
helped us be successful.
It was still helpful.
Absolutely.
The truth of what was trying to be communicated was helpful.
Yes.
And I find it's helpful because we give feedback to our younger professionals here, right? Like we're in the trenches with our listeners and with our managers
Right.
and with our HR professionals. And I find it very helpful to start the conversation with what is my intent,
Yes.
right? I think you're going to be a very talented lawyer. Let's just use us as an example, right? You're going to be a very talented lawyer. You already are, right? And I look forward to working with you for a very long time, right? There's this one in this
Be careful
thing,
not to promise indefinite employment, but yes,
Oh,
no,
I have like a little "Don't worry, you're still at will" sign just around me wherever
Oh,
I
I
go.
see. Okay, perfect.
But you can be fired at any time for any reason, no matter what. But okay, not exact words, but you get the point,
Yes.
right? And I just want you to know that to take your performance to the next level, something you could do, and that I really want you to do
Yeah.
is, let's just take a stupid example, to proofread your writing better before you send it to me or a client, right? It's really got to be error-free. And the last 2 or 3 things I got had quite a few typos. So how can we get to a point where that's not happening anymore? Do you need, a proofreader, a secretarial assistant, for instance? Is there a time of day when you find yourself, right, making more errors, oral proofread, you know what I mean?
Right.
And then you close the meeting on a positive. Great. Well, obviously, I was a little disappointed with the typos the last 3 projects, but after this, I just don't think it's going to be an issue anymore.
I would
And
put
that's a
this,
great way to end
Yes.
it. And it's much better received. And by the way, people are much more willing to correct the issue than if you come in yelling and screaming and throw something on their desk and say, what is this? This is terrible. Look at all these mistakes. And you walk out. Then the person can get paralyzed by anxiety.
or just more direct, and not say it's terrible, but not Right. Not have the additional information that you just provided, just be very direct.
Just stick to the facts. I don't think you don't say you're stupid, you're sloppy, you're lazy.
Right.
You don't characterize, you don't try to imagine the reasons why. You just the facts. Here's something you gave me. It had 18 typos in it. Okay, we can't have that. That's not okay. So what can we do to make sure that does? Great. Okay, then I'm sure it won't happen again. And with optimism, not pessimism.
I think I'm getting a lot of requests for leadership training on various topics.
Yep.
I think HR folks are making their way down a to-do list that was probably put together during COVID. But in any case, I think providing effective feedback is fantastic leadership training. It doesn't have to be an hour and a half, but coaching in that area is very effective training. And also, I think teaching newer employees upon hire how to receive feedback is also incredibly effective training to give them as well. And just to be clear, at the end of the day, sometimes we have situations in which an employee simply is unwilling or unable to accept feedback in a constructive way and wants to over and over frame it as being bullied. They feel like they're being bullied. They feel like they're being harassed, etc. We can navigate our way out of that, to be clear. We can tell our employees that the expectations of the job include not only job performance, but also being able to accept feedback. And if they're not able to accept feedback, there's not really a path to success for them.
The important thing for listeners before we move on is to not be paralyzed.
Yes.
Right? When someone
When you
says,
see
I'm
those
being
words.
harassed, it's an unsafe space. Treat it just as if you have before you know they're using the
Good
words
stuff.
now.
Okay. Good stuff.
What's next? What's on your mind?
What's next? Okay, so for our, what word are we using instead of younger?
Employees newer to the workforce.
Employees newer to the workforce.
That's a mouthful.
I'm seeing an interesting conundrum. On one hand, they often seem to be connected to work and social media and platform devices at all times.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All day, every day. God, I mean, so am I now.
So am I.
Right. So are most of our
During this
listeners.
podcast, my watch is buzzing. When
Right,
I get a
exactly.
Text, right?
So-
Okay.
But on the other hand, they very much want a distinction between work and their personal lives.
Yep.
They want work-life balance.
Yep.
Okay. And so I'm seeing a lot of reaction from employees newer to the workforce to getting text messages and emails after times that they find acceptable. I'm sorry.
Right.
And there's often, in my experiences, there's often just a disconnect in communications.
Yeah.
Somebody like me is catching up at 7 or 8 at night, right? Checking things off my list, as I love to do. Often, quite frankly, knowing that I won't get a response, which just makes it wonderful because I can just send it out and I'm done, right? So I'm catching up, so I'm sending things out. I have no intention. I'm very rarely have an expectation that I'm going to get a response from the person I'm sending it to.
Right.
But somebody newer to the workforce might get my email
Right.
or text message and interpret it differently.
Folks who are only used to IMs and snaps and Insta and text, that world expects immediate response, and maybe that's overstating it, but assigns value and judgment to how quickly a response comes.
Yes.
Right? So that is a mindset that I don't have.
Right.
That you don't have. It's very frustrating to my children. When someone texts me, I don't text back right away, and they say, Mom. Right?
Yes.
Just because you get a text doesn't mean I have to respond right away. But in their world, different types of communication indicate different types of responses.
Demands.
And let's
Yes.
face it, they have not grown up on email. I'm just telling you, this is shocking to a lot of people like me that have been in the workforce for a while. They do not know email until they get to college.
Yes.
And a lot of them make a lot of mistakes in college because they don't check it. It's just not part of their lives. And so, which I know is shocking to those of us in the workforce, right? So then they get here and they may think it's like a text. right? Which is immediate, and if you don't immediately respond, it sends a message that you are not interested, right? Like how quickly you like someone's new Insta post sends a message, not just how many likes you get, but how fast. They assign value to that. Right? So there's just a miss there sometimes. So I think technology can help in two ways. One is we can be more thoughtful in the technology we use or the mode of communication we use to communicate with employees, frankly, everyone, but particularly those newer to the workforce who they themselves assign importance to the way we communicate. I can send a text on a work related. I really do not expect a response. And I don't expect instantaneous response. I'm too old for that nonsense, right? But if I send that to a younger lawyer here, they assume I want an instant response. If I really don't, it would be better for me to send an email. Right. So just be thoughtful. And for our listeners, most of whom are not lawyers, working in law firms, think about your frontline supervisors and how they're communicating, right, with people during non-traditional work hours. They cannot be sending texts and then be shocked when someone complains that they have to work off hours, right? When texts are being sent off hours. Also remember for your non-exempt folks, of course.
You got to pay them for
they
it.
They would start have to being paid. If you really are checking things off your list, right, use an email. And then with email, there's a few tools you can use. One is, I've used this a lot during my career, actually. You can set a time for an email to be sent. So you can check it off your list, write this beautiful email, and assign it to be sent the next morning at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, interesting.
So that people don't get it off hours. It's on an email by email basis, so it's not like an automatic thing. You can also, one of my clients, who I email with because she's a client, has a great sign off that I love, and I'm paraphrasing here, an automatic sign off on every email. It says, I sometimes work unusual hours. I don't expect you to. No need to respond to this email until your next regular working time.
Yeah, I really like that.
Great. That way you don't have to remember to say it every time. The bad news is every once in a while there's an emergency and you do need someone
then you got to put
to respond.
Like, for example, her emails to you.
I respond.
You might not want to wait till the next.
I assume she doesn't mean me. But I thought that was thoughtful, right, for someone that, for a gazillion different reasons, might be sending emails at weird times, and then that takes the pressure off the person on the receiving end. There is a increasing expectation amongst folks newer to the workplace, right, that they're not always on, even though they are always connected. They just want to be connected to us.
They're just not connected to work. They're connected otherwise.
I think that communication is key in those, whether you expect them to be and whether or not, if it's just for a once-a-year emergency or no, we're in a client service industry, right? And sometimes you will be. You're not for everyone. Right?
Yeah.
And if the expectation is, yes, we are in a service industry and this is what needs to be done, right? And that's not for them, better know it now.
Yeah.
Right? In my opinion. It's all about the communication. Okay. Can I talk to you about benefits for a minute? We don't do that a lot.
I was going to say, do you literally mean 1 minute? If so, yes.
I can't do anything. I can't even say my name in 1 minute, Sarah. You know that about me. Anyone that works with me knows that about me.
Let's talk about benefits. If you want to talk about benefits, I know it's going to be something interesting that our listeners probably want to hear about. So you just dive in and
we don't talk about it a lot because we like to enjoy our time. And it's hard to get a laugh out of benefits.
Before these, yes.
We usually not. And it's hard to get a laugh when talking about benefits. I should pause and say we love our benefit law colleagues.
Well, this is why I love them.
This is why we love them. Don't worry, we do have people at Miller Johnson that just do employment benefits.
Yes.
Do a great job that we rely on, and we call in when any of you call us to talk about it, and we probably introduce you to them. And I know about what I'm about to say because of one of our benefits lawyers, Tripp, who turned me on to this, and I think it's just brilliant. But it came out in 2020. And what else was happening in 2020?
I don't know. What was happening
HR
in 2020?
people had nothing to do in 2020. No, obviously people were swamped for between 2020 and now, to be honest with you. So it flew under the radar, and it was a provision of the CARES Act, which was it actually has coronavirus in the name of it. I'm not going to read the whole name of it to you. But there was a provision that had nothing to do with coronavirus, and it has to do with a new benefit where employers can help pay down student loan debt for their employees, which is mostly going to affect those newer to the workplace, although not uniquely,
Right.
but more often. This is a benefit that could be very attractive to the workers, coming out of.
And set a business apart from other employers, right? It's exactly the
Absolutely.
kind of like interesting hook that not only is a nice benefit, but demonstrates
Right.
that an engagement with that an understanding of student loan debt. Let's put it
Yes.
that way, and a desire to help
And
newer employees be
We all know that's
successful,
been in the
et cetera.
news, the growing student
Yeah.
loan debt. We know because we both have
really cool,
kids in
right?
college. The cost of going to school is much
Yeah,
higher than what it
interesting.
was for us and for lots of other people. So I think all folks need to know is that anything with benefits is actually tax law.
Right.
So this actually, you can always give your employees anything. The question always is, does it count as taxable income? All right. So that's where this comes in. So this was an amendment to the tax code. You have to have a plan. There's lots of details about what that plan is or isn't. We have people who can help you with that. The last important thing I want HR folks to take away if they're considering this is just to know that there are third-party benefit providers, just like healthcare, right, and life insurance and other benefits you provide to your employees that handle this for you. So you can contract with those organizations to provide this benefit. They collect all the student loan information and
figure
administer
that
it
out.
for you.
And from what
So it
I've
does not have to be
right.
burdensome if you decide to
Exactly,
offer this
right.
benefit.
And what I've seen those third-party vendors do is not only help with this student loan payment, which I think is $52.50 a year. Employers can
Ish,
pay on a tax-free basis, and it's not wages, so there's no payroll taxes, et cetera.
Yep.
So it helps with that, but also can help employees consolidate their loan and get
Yes.
it at a lower interest
Yep.
rate, et cetera, which somebody who's just coming out of college often doesn't have access to resources like that or understand how that can be done. So that can be a really nice benefit as an add-on as well.
I agree. For those, we all need recruiting still a hot topic, right? Because so many people dropped out of the workforce. In our next episode, we'll be talking about retirement and succession planning. So that's a great segue. But when attracting folks newer in their careers, that can be a great benefit
Awesome.
that a lot of people don't know about.
Good conversation.
Yeah, I look forward to talking to you about the other end of the spectrum.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.